YouTube, what the redaction video is going on? HeirofCarthage here. What? Redaction video? Yes. No, so actually this is Lore Fire Part 2, but we're going to start things off by correcting a little bit of what I said in the first one. So, regeneration. Obviously I didn't run over the tooltip, which would have been the smart solution, and a lot of people seem to think that I'm crazy for not having done that, and perhaps you're right, but at the time I was just in the battle testing, and when I saw a Cryptor drop and the unit didn't regenerate, my mind was leading towards, oh, regeneration, you must not be able to regenerate fire damage. That was clearly incorrect. What was happening was the fireball was killing one of the 9 Cryptors, and regenerate does not resurrect. So if you see this here, I'm moused over the regeneration ability on the Cryptors. It says replenishes hit points of combatants. So it's not going to resurrect. So if you knock a unit model out, it's not going to resurrect. So that is why the Cryptors weren't regenerating. It was not because of the flame damage. So I think there was about 600 comments that made that perfectly clear because people love telling me when I'm wrong, and that's fine. I'm glad you all let me know because I was way off. But in any case, yeah. But you do see there in the red, it says plus 20% weakness to fire damage. So some people said that I should take down the old video and put it up because it's confusing. I don't need to take down the old video because some of what was in the old video was right. So I don't want to have to redo the whole video and re-upload it. That's just kind of weird, and it's going to mess up the whole exposure and flow of things. So I'm going to leave that video there. You've seen here that what I said there was incorrect, and I will prove that to you as if any of you doubted, because obviously most of you thought I was wrong and you were correct. Which, by the way, if you all think that I'm wrong, absolutely feel free to tell me. I always appreciate that in the comments. That way I'm not just making an idiot out of myself for any longer than is necessary. But at the same time, I will ask this. If you see that I'm doing something wrong and you're going to comment on it, please feel free to comment. However, if you don't mind, just do a quick cursory check of the comments. I'm not asking you to read every single comment all the way to the end. But if you see that like already 50 other people have commented it, just like thumbs up on the one that's getting the most attention, because what that does is it's going to bring it to the top of the comment section, and other people will see it sooner, and we don't end up with like 600 of the same comments down in the... Oh, I'm exaggerating, obviously being a little bit sarcastic, but it's a lot. So again, I'm not discouraging you from making comments, and if someone makes a comment that other people have already pointed out, there's no need to attack them or anything. I'm not going to either. I'm just saying that that's helpful for people if you feel like I got something wrong, and it'll help other people see it sooner. So what I'm going to do is bring in this, that's the fireball. I'm going to bring in the piercing bolts of burning for a bit of a demonstration. We're going to hit these Cryptors with the burning. Hopefully I'll hit them with it. Yeah. So this is a flaming spell. In my old theory I was saying they can't regenerate flame damage, which is obviously incorrect. So here when we hit these guys with the piercing bolts of burning, you'll see that they do regenerate that damage. It's because the spell did not kill a single unit of the Cryptors. And again, we can show that demonstration here real quick if this will hurry up and give me one more Winds of Magic. Come on. There we go. So watch, the fireball will kill one of the Cryptors, and it's going to prevent them from replenishing the hit points that they lost there. So there was a little bit of splash damage. They'll replenish the splash damage. Go ahead and get out of there, horsey. Yeah, go ahead and run away there, dunce. Alright. Apparently I have the Bright Wizard dunce. Yeah, so if you watch the Cryptors, they should regenerate to 51. Really? They can outrun a horse? Run! Wow, I guess when they hit their charge speed, they're as fast as a horse. Yeah, see, they regenerated to 5120, and that's because if you take their original health and divide it by 9 and then subtract that amount from the original, you'll end up at 5120. So there you go. Let's move on with the rest of the Lore Fire. Redaction segment complete. Alright, so what is left in the Lore Fire? We hit Fireball, we hit Flaming Sword of Ruin, we hit the Cascading Fire Cloak, we have the Burning Head up next. So again, we did learn about the regeneration, at least the regenerate on the Cryptors that comes from that little thing that says regenerate. They will take extra damage from fire. So you can keep that in mind as we run through the rest of these tests. We have the Flaming Head. The Flaming Head is a pretty powerful vortex spell, but it's another one of those ones that just wanders all over the place. Let's go see if we can make it work out in the middle of a battle. And to make like a best case scenario for damage, I'm going to use a bunch of units that regenerate. Alright, I'm here on the battlefield and just want to do a quick reminder. So the overcast, or the standard version is 11 cost from the Winds of Magic. It's magical and fire damage. It has a large moving area of effect. It's not good against a single opponent, and the reason they say that is because this thing's going to be going all over the place. And it's going to leave them with a hex called Burnt that takes away 8 leadership. So there's a bit of a leadership hex. It doesn't say how long that... Oh, okay, it does right there. Sorry, 10 seconds. Not a real long time. It's a 20-second duration. If you overcast it, you get an increased effect area, so it's going to affect more of an area. And it's going to have a 40-second last. But again, I think we've seen with these vortexes as they go all over the place so funky that's probably not going to be a realistic scenario. So I need a pretty decent amount of mana to overcast this. I think it's 18. The Cryptors are split evenly going around the Glacial Lake here. I have the Bright Wizard up on the Pegasus. Ooh, I need to go see if I can find a different map. This one's driving me nuts. But this, I'll tell you what this map is good for. It's good for bottling up big groups of enemies because of the way the AI moves around this little lake, or this little hole in the lake. Okay, there's a lot of Cryptors getting engaged right here in this one vicinity, so this is perfect. I'm going to drop the Flaming Head right in the middle of these guys, and let's watch what happens. I didn't do an overcast because I just want to see how it goes to start off with. And you can see immediately it veers kind of off into my own men more than the Cryptors, and helps defeat the Halberdiers for the Cryptors while causing very little damage to them. And this is the problem with vortex spells. You can see that one just launched right back through my own lines, and if I would have launched it straight at the Cryptors, it would do very little damage. So let's just wait, and we'll try another Flaming Head real quick. I got a 10-second cooldown, assuming my guys survive that long at this point, thanks to the Flaming Head. Let's do the extended effect duration. At least I thought we could. Okay, now we can do an extended duration. I'm going to drop it right in the middle of the Cryptors once again. The Flaming Head moves pretty quickly. It doesn't stick around for very long. You can see the extended, the overcast just stays on the ground longer. It doesn't necessarily do more damage. So, I mean, this spell is so wildly unpredictable. It's turned to the right both times. So, I mean, I'll cast it a few more times and test, but you can see it's easily killed more of my own men than it has Cryptors, even though I dropped it right on top of the Cryptors. And they just regenerate the damage anyway. So even though they're weak to flame damage, and honestly, we'll test this on just some standard infantry units next, but you can see that this is going to be the real problem here. You can see the path here, the Flaming Head, it just wanders off into the middle of nowhere. I mean, how is this ever going to be helpful? When is there ever going to be a scenario when it's like, okay, I'm going to cast this, and I'm going to get lucky, and it's just going to go straight down this really weird path and kill all... No, I mean, this is never going to happen. So again, this is the problem with vortex spells. They move too fast, and they move too far. If they would slow down a little bit and not move as great a distance, so like they're a little more central to where you originally cast them, yes, they can move around, but maybe if they like bobbed and weaved, like say within a radius, so say like if I dropped that Flaming Head and it kind of stayed within a radius like this, that would be useful. And even though it would be all around in here, that can potentially be useful as opposed to almost being guaranteed to take a weird course off into the middle of nowhere. So let's test it against some regular infantry though. Alright, here we are on the MP Crossroads map, which is a nicer testing ground. I've brought a ton of Bretonnian spearmen with shields to create, again, what I hope is an ideal scenario to prove the value of Flaming Head. I'm just going to do a normal one because it goes so far off course. Look at that, immediately into my own men. It's almost like this thing has an affinity for your own troops. And it's following that same pattern. I don't know if this is going to hold out, but it seems like it hooks off, or like slices off to the right every time I've cast it so far, and it just immediately went through my own men. This is why these spells, like I said, they're so cool looking, but they're so frustrating because it's almost like they're programmed to be annoying and not quite do what you need them to do. So like, watch. I'm going to plug this right out here to the right of these guys, where if it did what it did last time, it's going to go right through them. But watch, this time it'll probably swing out to the left. See that? It's like the area of effect knows to stay away from enemy troops. Did I call that or what? Like swung straight out to the left, away from the enemy. and it swings like just completely away from the battle. We're gonna do it again. My guys should be able to hold out long enough in the fight for me to get another shot here. I'll drop it right on top of him again. And if I drop it on top of him, I got 10 bucks that says it goes through my own guys. We'll see. I mean, I could be wrong. This could totally be random. Now it's going to go left again. Now, yeah, it's going to go left. So, see, it comes in, does a little bit of damage, and it's just going to keep swinging on out. So this one's almost guaranteed to kind of swing out in like this hook shape, it seems like. Did it do a lot of damage there? I mean, I've got 139 kills. That's mostly only because I've piled up hundreds of spearmen within the range. This is not a likely scenario for you run into online. So I find that this would be a highly unlikely scenario. In fact, I'm going to try and get another flame storm ready. It looks like we can do one more. Let's try it again. I'm going to drop it right in the guys. Just see if this thing ever travels on more of a straight line. Nope, it's going to immediately veer right into my own men. The randomness of these spells is, I mean, it's such a cool looking spell. I mean, look at it. It looks amazing. And the damage on it really isn't that bad. It's the fact that you cannot with any degree of accuracy predict how to use this thing. So see there, that was the path that one took. So we've cast it several times, and it's an extremely unpredictable path. Doesn't seem like it's ever going to be worthwhile. So I don't even think there's a whole lot of use in testing this on different kinds of units, because no matter what unit I use it on, it's never going to stay on top of them long enough to actually cast or to actually cause the damage. So Flamestorm, Flaming Head, I'm recommending a pass. Alright, so the next spell that I'd like to try is the Piercing Bolts of Burning. And once again, it says strong versus a unit. So what that tells me is that they're recommending that I drop this on a single unit. So what I'm going to do is test against a single unit, try and hit them with this, and then I will try and test it against multiple units to see whether or not that suggestion is correct. Again, causes magical and fire damage, says it's a large strike area. And if I overcast it, it goes from 12 to 18 and gives me a wider strike area with more missiles. So let's see what happens when we test out Piercing Bolts of Burning. So there we go. Alright, I'm back on the crossroads where we're going to test out just a standard Piercing Bolts of Burning versus this Spearmen at Arms with shields. I don't know how much the spin-up time is in the spell, so I'm going to drop it right there. Okay, it's 3 seconds. That won't be a bad shot. They're going to try and dodge it, so it will be a bad shot. So not a direct impact. The damage just really isn't that impressive. So, yeah, nothing to write home about there. And this is not a well-armored unit by any means, or a particularly high health unit. And this is not surprising. So you see a lot of people, or pretty much all people, don't use these bombardment spells, and it's for 2 reasons usually. One is you have to target it on the ground, which means your opponent can see it, and they're almost certainly going to dodge it, because it has a long spin-up time. So you have to be predictive, unless the enemy's fixed in position, and then you're going to damage your own units if you do it. So that's the challenge. And then 2, they just don't really seem to be much to write home about. So like if I cast it right here, we should be able to catch the AI in a better position. So you can see it's a larger area. This is the overcast version. See, even the AI dodges it. And see how effectively the AI can dodge it? Pretty well. Now that overcast version had a lot more bolts, and it did considerably more damage, but I just spent almost 20 mana, it was 18 mana, to kill off not even half the hit points of a Spearman at Arms. So again, don't think there's a whole lot of testing necessary here. There is one thing I'll go test that may be interesting, but as a general rule, I don't think this is going to be a very worthwhile spell unless you are testing it against a massively blobbed up enemy, where you're guaranteed to have every bolt hit. So we are going to test this against an absolute, what I feel like is a best case scenario, a huge blob of enemies, where I'll be hitting almost all enemies and very few of my own troops, and they won't be moving, so it should be a direct hit. First, let's just watch the eye candy. Should be a lot of fun. And we'll see the amount of damage done. So pretty impressive visually. what was the damage? The damage was considerable because these units were absolutely pinned still, and they got hammered by every bolt. The Bright Wizard, it doesn't list any kills for the Bright Wizard as a result of that. I find that very hard to believe. So clearly it didn't count the kills from the spell there. That's a little bit frustrating. That's something about Warhammer that needs to be fixed. So yeah, we'll just fast forward, and I'm going to use just a standard spell right here, and we'll see what the difference looks like. Again, the strike area is smaller, and there's going to be fewer bolts, so less overall damage dealt. So here comes another bombardment. That's going to hit pretty much all Bretonnians. And, you know, even just the standard version there causes a decent bit of damage, but what are the chances that your opponent is going to be crazy enough to do something like this? Again, this is where I just don't think that this spell pays off. One interesting use for it would be, can it do a lot of damage to an artillery piece? Let's go find out. So could you use piercing bolts of burning as an effective artillery destroying tool? You can see that the overcast version of this covers the whole artillery thing within its range. Let's see whether or not such a thing is a potential use for this. Here we go. It's a pretty solid bombardment. Hits these guys all over, and it does destroy one of the artillery pieces. And it leaves, but I mean, even still, this field trebuchet was hit directly with an overcast spell. It does take out one of the artillery pieces, but it didn't do much else. Let's try it one more time and maybe just see if random was at play here. Alright, was it random? Or is that going to be a repeatable result? I'd kind of like the trebuchet to sit completely still since it was last time, so let's give it my halberdiers as a target so it'll sit still. There we go. Alright, trebuchet is going to sit on its rump. Piercing bolts of burning. Once again, I'm going to target it right here in the center of this group. And let's see if we can get a better result or a worse result. If it doesn't destroy the artillery piece, in my opinion, it's not worth it, because it's such a small unit with limited hit points and very low armor and other stuff. Typically, that time it didn't even destroy a artillery piece. I mean, you would think a flaming spell would be pretty good against this kind of thing, but I mean, you're going to see that they start to waver because of the damage taken. But they're going to balance out, and they're going to keep firing. So unless you had a way to follow up on such a thing, this is not going to be, I don't believe, an effective artillery destroying tool either. Let's move on to the last spell. So the last spell is Flamestorm, which is similar to all the others. It's magical fire damage. This one says it's strong versus multiple units, though probably encouraging you to try and target it on a main formation. It gets an extended effect duration of all the way at 54 seconds, which is crazy. But once again, how often do you think that 54 seconds worth of vortex is ever going to do anything? 27 seconds is already pretty long now. The one decent thing about Flamestorm is that it moves relatively slow, meaning that sometimes you can get some damage in. Alright, we're going to have a little fun here. Here comes Flamestorm. I'm going to overcast it, the big Redonkulous edition. And I'm going to cast it right out here in front of their army and let this thing hopefully just swing around out in the middle of them for like 50-something seconds, hopefully disrupting the entire enemy army. This is a pretty typical way for someone to march forward, maybe a little thicker in the center, but spread out, relatively large. Look at the Flamestorm. See how it's just kind of curling around in front of them? Now, if this was a real player, they would start dodging this, kind of like the AI is. They'd walk away from it. So other than maybe disrupting an enemy formation, I fail to see that these vortex spells are going to be wildly useful. Now, you will notice that this one stays in a relatively small area here, and it is kind of an area denial thing right now, if you feel like that would somehow become tactically important. But it only just now has caused any damage to any unit, and it got right on top of this unit. You can see when it does massive damage when it rolls through these units. Huge damage. But at the same time, it's so random. And see that now, again, if we take a look at this scenario, the only good thing that happened for me, and maybe this is worth it. Maybe there's a tactical use to this. Now, I ate up my almost entire Winds of Magic, but I did create this huge gap in the enemy lines here. Could you shoot that with cavalry now? Could you come in and wreak havoc? Could you get through their lines and potentially get to a lord or something else? So does this have some value just from this standpoint? Yes. Probably. If you feel like you need a way to bust through enemy lines and get behind, you could potentially use it for that. Would it work against a player? Potentially. If they move out of the way of the flamestorm, they may just let it hit them. And if that's the case, they're not going to get terribly disrupted. Let's try one more scenario. I forgot to put my Bright Wizard on a Pegasus. How genius is that? But it shouldn't matter. I'm going to overcast this flamestorm right in the middle of the Bretonnian troops.
The winds grow hot.
Alright. So let's see if the flamestorm's able to get a lot of work done, if it even stays on target. And you'll see the flamestorm kind of bounces around a little bit more, moves a little bit slower. And it's already actually entirely routed a single unit. And again, you can see that this particular spell is staying in a more concentrated area for the most part. That circle I drew, it only just now ventured outside of it. And it picked up 206 kills, maybe a little bit less. And you can see that, I mean, as it kind of stayed on top of that blob, even momentarily, it caused massive damage. And even, I mean, just the overall radius is still relatively contained here. If you look at like a radius, it's something like that. And although this scenario isn't super likely in terms of the enemy bunching up, let's redraw that real quick, see if it stays in there. Looks like it is. I mean, it's staying in a relatively small spot. So this scenario isn't super likely with someone bunching up all over you, but it is somewhat likely that you could end up with an area like this size that you might get a lot of damage done. And you can see that, yeah, they're just spearmen, but obviously this spell can get a lot of damage done. Now there is one other type of unit that I want to test this on, just because it's fun. So ethereal units have a particular weakness to magical damage because they have 80% physical resistance. They don't have any resistance to magical damage. Now this spell is part magic damage, part fire apparently. Let's drop a flamestorm right in here on these Cairn Wraiths, and let's see how much damage it can do, even if it's just a short amount of time. So is this a good spell against ethereal units? It tossed these guys all over the place, which seems to have saved them from a little bit of the damage, to be honest. But I mean, again, where it's hitting them, and it is romping all over these guys, so I've gotten a pretty darn good cast here. I mean, it's still not doing a very impressive amount of damage to these Cairn Wraiths. It's mostly just tossing them around. Doesn't seem to be particularly damaging to them, and now it's going to wander off. So is this a particularly effective spell versus Cairn Wraiths? No, not really. It appears to just kind of toss them around and not really get the damage done. You all have seen me use Foot of Gork before, and it was much, much more effective. But what about like Piercing Bolts of Burning? That one's 12 wins of magic. Let's see if Piercing Bolts of Burning does any better. Probably not if the Flamestorm didn't, because these are relatively similar types of magic, so I would assume that they're going to have similar effects. Here we go. We got a nice spot here where it should be nothing but Cairn Wraiths that it hits. These guys over here have suffered pretty much no damage. So let's see what happens. Again, this was an ideal scenario. It spread that damage all over these units. It did do a lot of damage, but again, when are you going to have 8 Cairn Wraiths balled up against you in the right spot? So I don't think that this is going to, I mean, although it's better than not having any magical damage, I don't think that this Lore of Fire stuff is particularly useful against ethereal units. I think there's better options. Hope you all enjoyed this. This has been the last look at the Lore of Fire. Did I get it wrong again? Do you need to correct me? Do you think there's something I didn't test? Let me know what you think. If not, what's the next test? We don't have to do Lore of Magic. Is there a certain unit you want to see? Is there a certain mechanic you want to see? Maybe it is magic you want to see. Just let me know, and we'll give it a test. HeirofCarthage signing out. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, and I will bring you more. And also want to thank MSI for having sponsored the machine that I recorded this on. See you next time.